Hey, welcome everyone to this week's edition of the State of Greater Western New York Report. We would like to welcome everyone back who attended last night's great Greater Western New York Town Hall meeting where several candidates were endorsed by the attendees of that meeting. If you want to see a replay of that, go to our companion site, greaterwesternnewyork.org, and it should be up there. Today, this morning, this afternoon, it's lunchtime. Hey, happy lunch, everyone. We've got a very special guest. He's a returning guest who is going to tell us a little bit of maybe about the insider's view of what's going on in this year's election in New York State. But first, we want to just say, hey, this is brought to you by...
Each week, our community makes history. Each week, you make history. And each week, there's only one source to turn to for the first take on history. You know what that is? Subscribe to the Sentinel right now to discover the history being made in your own backyard. The Linden Honeoye Falls Lima Sentinel. More than just your news, it's your history. Welcome, everyone, to this edition of the State of Greater Western New York Report. Join us each episode as we discuss fantastic topics ranging from history to science to the strange and the wonderful, as well as the treasured spirit with which our region has infused America. We challenge you to consider all things Greater Western New York, from our region's very beginnings to how it inspires, how it empowers, and why it is so admired. Here's the host of the State of Greater Western New York Report, Chris Carosa.
Hi there again, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of the State of Greater Western New York Report. With me today is Assemblyman David DiPietro. David represents the 147th District, Assembly District, and he's in the western portion of the Greater Western New York region. We're going to give David a chance to talk a little bit about some of the issues that were brought up at the town hall meeting. David is running unopposed, so we only invited candidates last night who were running in competitive races. So, David, let's just start off and saying, whoa, we don't want to do that. We are fumbling through everything here today. So first, David, how's everything going in your campaign? I know you're running unopposed, but how does that work when you run unopposed? What goes on?
You get to sleep in and go to bed late. So it's nice to not have an opponent this year, and that's I think that's because of the hard work we've done, the district, and how we've gone out over the years in this district and talked to everyone, and we represent their views, and I hope that's what it is that people why we're in this position that we're in. So it's a good thing.
So let's start off. We're going to go over some of the questions that were brought up to the candidates last night, and hopefully that'll take the first segment of the show. And the last segment, we really want to know about some of the things that we talked about earlier in the green room about the state of Western New York, or New York State, really, for that matter. So let's start off with an easy one that really we kind of gave everyone, and that was December 16th, 1786, was the Treaty of Hartford, when New York State and Massachusetts agreed who owned the Greater Western New York region. At that point, both of them were claiming ownership. So what we asked the candidates last night, what I'll ask you now, is what's the process for going about one of those resolution things that just recognizes that date as the birthday of the Greater Western New York region?
Well, you can put up a resolution. It has no teeth to it, so it's not like you're going to be able to turn the clock back. But you could put up a resolution and get it through and have people vote on it or whatever, or just make it at the beginning of the day. They'll announce it. More importantly, though, I think, instead of a show, which is what that would be, is to really sink our teeth into creating the 3 autonomous zones, splitting off New York City, which is the bill I have, which is the first time anyone actually wrote the bill. People talk about splitting off New York City for 50 years, but no one actually had the guts to actually put it down in writing and take the heat for it, and I did. And I think when we get to that point, which we're getting close to, I think that's what we really need to do is stop talking the talk and getting these New York City Democrat communists and telling them that we don't want anything to do with New York City anymore or Albany. We want our own government. We want our own region that we can actually be in charge of ourselves and watch this state turn redder than Texas overnight by doing that.
So David is answering question 5 at the same time he's answering question 1. So we'll give you a chance to talk a little bit more about that. But certainly, yes, you're right. This is more of a symbolic gesture. And it's one that many people think it's easier to get everybody on both sides to go along with, because all you're doing is affirming history. So the second question really has to do with an issue that came up at an earlier town hall meeting. I think the one that we had in March. We had a superintendent from a school in Livingston County. All the schools signed a letter and sent it to the governor, basically saying, hey, let the local districts make the decision when it comes to the health of our students and our teachers. And how could this be sort of solidified within New York State for this particular item with regards to school districts having their own autonomy to make their own decisions?
Well, it's great. I have a lot of education bills that I've written that give parents more control over their children's education, the curriculum, taking certain things out of the school district, the wokeness. But the fact is, you have to get through NYSET, the teachers union, and state education, because everything now has been driven to Albany. We did it with, or you saw Governor Cuomo do it, and Kathy Hochul is totally in the hands of the left right now. She can't make a decision on her own. Everything she does is she's told what to do. But Cuomo, you saw, drive everything out of Albany. One government, one size fits all. And until you can break that, we don't have the votes, we don't have the willpower, because it's just there's nothing we can do about it. It's all one size. While these are great and these counties do it, it's sort of like the SAFE Act when 53, 57 counties, something like that, said we don't want anything to do with the SAFE Act, went against it, but in the end, it was just on a piece of paper and it had no teeth to it, because Albany and the governor controlled everything in this state that happened. And that's the same thing with this education issue. It's going to fall on deaf ears, and unless some school district actually has the guts to pull out and actually do this, okay, and I don't see one school district that's going to, because their funding will get pulled, and it'll be a horror nightmare for that. And there's no superintendent making $300,000 a year that I can see that's going to put his job on the line. We did have that a couple years ago in the Pioneer School District in my area. And he basically at the last day of school, he shut it down. Said, we're not going to adhere to the mandates from the state. And he shut the school down on the last day as a show of defiance. And we saw what happened there. The state came after him, pulled funding. They don't play fair. They play very dirty. They threaten everyone, and they'll pull jobs, they'll pull funding. And I don't see that becoming an actual issue, because I think it's all for show.
So there's a related question that came up again at one of the earlier town board meetings, and that has to do with the Climate Act. And in this case, this is the one where municipalities are required to have all electric fleets by 2035. And from a technology standpoint, this doesn't seem possible. What's going to happen if the technology doesn't catch up to the law? What happens?
It's not going to catch up to the law. It never has. And that's the way liberal Democrats, I don't call them liberal, they're communists, and we'll go into that. But they don't understand the whole process. They don't understand money. They don't understand technology. I've debated them numerous times on different laws where there is no technology. And it's ridiculous, okay? In 1998, I wasn't even in politics. I was a dry cleaner. And New York State passed a law that emissions out of a dry cleaning machine had to be so many parts per billion. There was no technology in the entire world to get to that point in 98. And in New York State, all the dry cleaning industry were up in arms because there was nothing they could do. But the New York State Assembly and Senate at the time, because I have the article, said, well, the technology will be there in a couple of years. Okay, we're looking at 25 years later in that industry. The technology for those emissions are still not there for New York State. 25 years, and it's been a nightmare for those in that business, in that industry, which I was one. They don't have it. They never did. It never was going to happen. It was all a big ploy for the environmentalists to claim a victory. New York State became the toughest place in the entire world to do dry cleaning, outside of, I think, Denmark, something like that. But at that time when that happened, I think 30% of dry cleaners left New York, dried up, went out of business, and they were all mom and pop stores, all because environmentalist wackos tried to put a stringent that had no perception in reality in New York State and put that on an industry and made tens of thousands of people lose their jobs overnight. I was there, I watched it, and we've done that with micro stamping. There's no technology. There's on a number of different issues. This energy, this electric. There's no technology. It's not there. You talk to anyone in NYSEG, National Grid, National Fuel. I have the technology won't be there in 5 years. Not even close to handle any of this. Not even close. So it's a big lie, but it's all driven by far left communists who are looking to destroy the economy as we know it and capitalism as we know it. And it's simple as that. Don't go any further. This is
Well,
it's a joke.
yeah, let me ask, because you bring up an interesting point with this dry cleaning situation. So the technology got there, but the law was still there. How did they reconcile the
The,
fact that the law couldn't
the
couldn't meet the
technology, yes, the technology was never has gotten there even to this day in 2022. So what happened? And this is what happens today when every year you get inspected like I did. The inspector comes in and checks your machine for leaks, has a little wand, he goes around. If he identifies a couple small leaks where this wand detects so many parts per billion, then you have silicone, a silicone caulk. And he goes to lunch. He says, here, he marks it with a marker, says, here's where your spots are. I'll be back in 20 minutes. This goes on throughout the state at every dry cleaners. And you take your silicone and you put it over that spot and dry up the leak, cover the leak. He comes back, everything's good. He gives you a clean bill of health. That's been happening for 25 years. Okay, because they put in a stupid law where there's no technology and there's no way, otherwise every dry cleaner will be out of compliance. End of story. So that's how they go around it. They
So
built a better mousetrap.
the law, but they put in a loop, or they didn't even put in a loophole.
No, they didn't.
The
They just went,
inspectors created this. Wow, that's interesting.
that's how it
Let's go to the next question. Sort of related again, and this has to do with the renewable energy uh, siting process that New York State has, where originally this board that was supposed to help determine whether or not these sites should be located within a community always had somebody who was local on it. A few years ago, Cuomo, when he was governor, decided to eliminate this local representative on the siting board through the Emergency Powers Act. So he circumvented the Constitution of New York State and and just unilaterally decided this is going to be no local people on this board, all state people. So what's the strategy now for really bringing the legislative peers together to ensure that its constitutional separation of powers remains intact, or does this have to be solved in the courts?
Oh, it's got to go to the courts. You think they care about separation of powers? Why do you think they did it in the first place? Look, you've got a great example of that right in my district on Lake Erie with the wind turbines. Those wind turbines that they want to put in the lake, which will pollute the lake literally, um, are unconstitutional. And the governor Cuomo at the time ran right over it and still has by saying we take all this control at the state level. No, the Constitution says this goes to the municipalities. Every municipality in Western New York that abuts the lake has said no. But yet Cuomo and now Hochul have said, no, we're going to take control at the state level. So it's the same thing. Okay. And if you think they care about the Constitution, they don't. Okay. You mentioned Andy Goodell when we were talking earlier, who's our floor leader, who's an attorney, who's a brilliant man. At least once or twice a week, we sit on the floor as Democrats bring up their bills. Okay. And I want to make that real clear. Uh, there's about 1,500 bills, 1,000 to 1,500 bills a year that come to the floor for a vote. Every single bill is Democrat sponsored because they are in the majority, we're in the minority. We never get a statewide bill to the floor. There has not been a Republican name on a statewide bill in over 42 years. So please, now they bring up now with the new communists in the assembly, they bring up over the last so many years, they'll bring up 1 or 2 bills a week that are unconstitutional. Andy Goodell will argue that on the floor and say, hey, this is unconstitutional. And he'll show you exactly why in the Constitution. They moan, they groan, they mock us out. And they just tell us right on the floor, we don't care about the Constitution. It's old, it's outdated, it's racist, whatever. Okay, and we're going to pass it anyway. And then they tell us what I learned on my very first day at the SAFE Act, the term 1 in 5. And the gentleman next to me, I kept saying, what's 1 in 5? I'm new here. What about? He goes, Dave, we know what's unconstitutional. We don't care. It'll cost you $1 million in 5 years. Take us to court. We'll see you in 5 years. In the meantime, this bill's getting passed. It's going to become law, and there's nothing you can do about it. And that's what they tell us every single day on the floor. So that's just, we're not going to change that. We're not going to change that. The Democrats want this. They love big government. They love control, and they don't care about the Constitution.
Well, we're going to skip question 5 because you already answered that at the first one. But, you've actually brought up something I want to talk about when we come out of the break. So let's break now for a commercial, and we'll be right back.
Through the mists of time, nature and man have both created and buried treasures beyond the imagination. With the ages, these riches slowly dissolve into mere myths until they are forever forgotten. But there are those brave souls who tirelessly cling to the truth, ever seeking to discover the undiscovered, to reveal what has always been there, to uncover the hidden gems of a land thought forsaken but loved by millions. 50 Hidden Gems of Greater Western New York. Discover the secrets in your own backyard. Buy your copy now at 50hiddengems.com.
Okay, we're back with David DiPietro. He is the Assemblyman from the 147th District in the Western New York region. So, David, we're talking about this really hurdle, I guess, in getting things moving forward in a way that perhaps represents a greater number of people within our own region, people who normally would not have a voice. And it really begs the question. I kind of thought that at least the Democrats from the greater Western New York region tended to be more moderate. Don't we have moderate Democrats still, and can't we work with them?
Not a chance. Sorry, those days are over. They're not moderate Democrats anymore. The far left has taken over, like we had talked about earlier. In the last 5 years, since AOC has been trying to wipe out and take over the New York State Assembly and Senate, she's been very successful. She's been taking on moderate Democrats in her own party. She's been putting her own communists up against them. And I mean communists. So these are people registered with the Socialist Democratic Party of the United States, the Communist Party. She's been very successful. When I was elected 10 years ago, there was one communist. That was Charles Barron from Harlem. He was a Black Panther. Now, in the last 4.5+ years, you've got approximately 16 that are registered communists in the assembly, and they run the show. She has essentially taken over. It's been a big bloodbath in their own party. There is no moderate Democrats in Western New York, okay? They all succumb to the far left that runs the party. Otherwise, they're shunned right out of the party. And I can tell you, on June 1st or 2nd was our last day in Albany this year. We go through the night, and it was about 7 a.m, and where everyone's tired, and we're sitting there, and 2 Democrats were retiring out of the blue. And they did a little thank you to them. And me and Assemblyman Steve Hawley from Batavia sit next to each other, and called them over during a break and said, what's going on? Because we know these guys. They've been there for 20-some years each. And they said, we've had enough, Dave. We've had enough. The communists now run our party. I can't even work with a Republican. If I even mention a Republican bill in my Democratic conference, I will get yelled at, berated. The new people come in are far left communists. They don't know anything about decorum. They don't know anything about procedure. They have no respect for seniority. They want everything right now, and they insist on it, and they are violent. He said, we're done. I said, I don't need this anymore. Both of them said, we don't need it. I'm done. I don't need. I've been here 25 years. One of them. He says, I don't even have an opponent, but I'm quitting. He goes, I'm just done. It's not the party it was 10 years ago, even 8 years ago. Everything's changed, and that's so. There are no moderates. They all succumb to the party heads, and they sit there and they don't say a word in Albany. They go along with everything that they're told to do. And then what I just find so absurd is when they come back here to Western New York and say all the things they're doing when it's a huge lie. It's a media made lie. And I'm telling that straight up. They don't do anything. They don't stand up against any of their bills. All these communist bills, they back them 100% and they vote for them. Then they come back to Western New York and say they're fighting for us. It's a complete joke.
So I had a question that came in that kind of is interesting. Is what you just said, does that explain the transition of Kathy Hochul, who originally was a congressman from here, I thought sort of more moderate, centrist, but now clearly, on the more left side of things?
100%. Let me tell you, I never thought I would say, boy, it'd be better if Andrew Cuomo was in charge. But let me tell you, the one thing Andrew Cuomo had, he was a tyrant, a dictator. No one liked him. Okay. He wasn't a warm and fuzzy person, but he had complete control of the Democrats in New York City. They kowtowed to him. They didn't go against him on anything. They hated him. And on the floor of the Assembly and in the Senate, they would say it all the time. They couldn't stand him, but they never went against him. He would have $1 million primary against them and wipe them out. So they kowtowed to him. They did his bidding. And he, even as bad as he was, but the sad part is it's gotten much worse because Kathy Hochul has no leadership ability. She has no power. She has to do whatever. They run her on a string. They tell her what to do every day. She has never had a complete innocent thought in her head since the day she got put into the governorship. They run her and they love it. So the far left is running her hard and they're telling her exactly what to do. We have no representation. You can talk to the Western New York Democrat delegation. I know they can't stand her. They don't say anything against her out here because she's from Western New York, but they thought that she was going to bring home a lot of bacon and a lot of stuff for Western New York because she was from here. And she has totally stripped them of everything and said no. And they are mad at her. Trust me, but they're not going to tell you in public. But I know behind the scenes, they are livid with her. They expected a lot more, and she's not delivering. She's kowtowed to the communists in New York City, and that's what we've got. That's why this state is so horrible, and she has never stood up for anybody. She's so far left now, but that's what you get when you have a governor or any elected official who has no plumb line, who doesn't care about right or wrong, and sits there with a toothy grin telling you things that you just look at her and say, it's a joke, and she's a joke.
This puppet string business model, so to speak, seems to maybe be working, not just in New York State, but at the federal level, and maybe next year in the Pennsylvania at the Senate level. It's it's tough to argue against it if it's working, despite how you feel about the issues. I mean, I'm just looking at what's actually happened. But so let's talk about an example where it might not have worked. And that's a local example with Byron Brown in Buffalo. So as you know, Byron Brown lost to a socialist in the primary. Yes. I know it was not a large voter turnout, and that might have skewed things. But this is an example of exactly what you were talking about, an AOC-inspired point of view coming in, knocking out what might be considered a more moderate or at least relatively centrist model, even though they're both Democrats. But Buffalo spurned that idea, and they reelected Byron on a write-in. So how might that suggest a different sort of view from Western New York and maybe a model going forward?
Oh, Western New York, Buffalo, as far left as it is, it's not New York City. Now, if Byron Brown had lived in New York City, he never would have got back on the. He never would have won. He did it in Buffalo because Buffalo is more of a little bit more moderate. Not all of Buffalo. There's parts of Buffalo which are very far left, but a lot of Buffalo around the suburb of the inner Buffalo, the voting area, are more a little bit moderate. They're left, but they're not her left. She was completely radical. Again, if she was in New York City, Byron Brown would not have beat her. But in Buffalo, he was able to hold it off and come back and do the challenge. And the good thing was with Byron, number one, he had been there a long time and he had a good record. Okay, as much as Byron is a Democrat, the guy has had a decent record for Buffalo. So that played in his favor also. Whereas she tried to upset the entire apple cart and turn it into a communist city. And people up here were just like, you know what, that's a little bit too far left for me. But again, if this was New York City, he would not have won.
I'll add that I interviewed a few weeks ago a publisher from New York City, Brooklyn, and he mentioned this race out of the blue, saying, my readers were shocked that she didn't win. They couldn't believe that somebody who won the Democrat primary didn't win the general election, even though it was against, whatever. So you're right. It's really a radically different point of view between downstate and in the greater Western New York region. So we had another question or idea that came in. Again, interesting. So what has happened historically as elements of any particular party tend towards the extreme? The moderates in that party, and actually you see this with Tulsi Gabbard now, leave the party. Is there a possibility that Republicans might latch on to some of these moderate Democrats? And I know that there's not 100% overlap in terms of issues, but might they convince some of these moderate Democrats, especially the ones who were incumbents, to run as Republicans?
Why would we want that? I don't get it. Okay. I want to bring back the values. I'm a conservative. I want to bring back this country. I don't want a moderate Democrat anymore, okay, because there's no such thing. And I know Tulsi Gabbard, but she's still got far left tendencies like most Democrats. I would have to have her prove it, and I'm not so sure. I'd rather put an actual Republican in than try and entice Democrats to come over, okay? This country's gone off the cliff. New York State has been off the cliff, and it's just gone way, way, way left, way too far. Okay, I don't need a Tulsi Gabbard. She's a nice lady. Don't get me wrong, but I would rather just stick with try and get this country back. I don't need to start bringing over moderate Democrats. Great that you left the party, and I understand why, because you're not a communist. But the fact is, I don't want leftist policies of any sort in my government. I want conservative values, and until they can prove to me that that's where they're going to stand, then I don't want anything to do with them.
Okay, so you don't run them, but there's a chance that you might be able to convince them to vote for the Republican candidate? Again, it might be, say, a more moderate Republican candidate. Is that a worthy strategy?
Oh, sure. You're always going to try and get moderate Democrats to come to your side. I have a lot of Democrats. I can't even tell you how many thousand voted for me in the last election, and I was unopposed. But there are Democrats that are just Democrat in name only. Okay, they actually you ask them about Pelosi or Schumer or Biden, and they're like, no, I don't want anything to do with those people. But they still remain on the Democrat line, and that's a problem. And I tell them, power in numbers. If you're a Democrat and you believe in Pelosi and Schumer and AOC and Biden and them, God bless you. I can have a great debate with you. That'd be fun. But if you're a Democrat that doesn't believe any of that, you call yourself a moderate and you don't vote for these Democrats that are far left, then get off the line, I tell them, because it's power in numbers. The Democrat Party looks at the numbers, and the numbers say that you're going to support everything that Chuck Schumer says, everything that Joe Biden says, and Kamala Harris and AOC. You believe it 100%. You're a Democrat. You believe every one of those things 100%. Otherwise, get off the line, change affiliation to something else, because that's the party, and that's, if you're a Democrat, you believe it 100%.
I think it's a testament to you as a conservative that you're getting support through these Democrats, these dinos, or do you call them dinos? But Democrats in name only. And I think it's also a testament to the level of extremism that they're perceiving within their own party, that they would actually go and support a conservative like yourself. Maybe you're less, say, off center than maybe you think. Maybe, and I'm not saying that your points of view are, but those points of view may be more embracive of the general population than perhaps other people in the media would suggest. So we're right around at our break time. I think that's it for our questions on the chat line there. So David, thank you very much. As always, very, very entertaining, very enlightening, and it's we got to have you back on, and maybe have it back on with a couple of your peers there and have a panel discussion like we did in the past. Those are always fun. But again, thank you for being on the show, and we'll see you later. Now, for those of you who want to be part of the live audience, I encourage you to sign up here at our website. It's stateof.greaterwesternnewyork.com. Go there. You can sign up for free. You'll get invited every Thursday when we have our show so that you too can ask a question of our guests. But other than that, that's all we have for now. So we will see you all next week. Bye-bye for now.